Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Media Boat Podcast, your weekly edition where we talk about movies, TV, music, and video games. Not necessarily in that order. My name is Mike. His name is Matt.
My name is Matt, maybe like 60% of Matt, and his name is Mike. I'm a little under the weather, but I'm here, at least for now. The camera is blurry again. I don't know what I did. But hey, thanks for coming to the Media Boat Podcast. We're still here. This is episode 464. Today is December 3rd, 2024. We are running to the last bit here of 2024 before we see what the next year has in store for us.
Yep. And
Today,
because it's December 3rd, happy PlayStation 30th anniversary!
yes, today as we
Woo!
record, oh, pardon me. Um, yes, it is the 30th anniversary of the Sony PlayStation. So where were you when it launched? Oh, it launched in Japan, so we didn't know about it.
No, we
Also,
didn't know
we were
about it.
four. Also, we were four. So, what are you gonna do? Anyway, but yeah, we're gonna do a reverse show today. I realize I'm still blurry. I don't know how to fix it.
All right, well, you fix that. Yes, we're gonna do a little reverse show because we have two movies that we both saw. One that we kind of queued up last week, and two that you forced me to watch. It said I needed to watch.
I didn't force you to do anything, but yes, we'll get to that.
Okay, we'll
But
get to
yeah,
that.
I'll go right into it. And we always start the movies section with the weekend box office numbers. Your number one movie, surprising the pants off of me, and I think a lot of people this week. Moana 2, which we figured was going to be a big hit, was way more of a hit than I imagined at $225 million in its opening weekend. Did you
That's
see
the
this coming?
opening. That's the opening 5 day weekend. We'll get to it on this, about all these little milestones that are happening for Moana. But no, I did not see 225 million opening weekend.
No. Honestly, I thought Wicked was going to be the big winner here. Like Moana just did laps around Wicked's performance. Of course, yes,
Is that a
you
swimming
brought up
pun?
a
A
good
water pun?
maybe. But like it's interesting that you brought up the reason why ostensibly, which is it had extra days to play with. It had the holiday, which gave it an advantage. But still, this much of an advantage is still kind of shocking.
I mean, yeah. We'll get to the actual numbers of how it did over the 3 day and
Yeah.
5 day and opening day
Mhm.
and just how it's doing over the course of the year
Yeah.
already through one weekend. But we got
Right.
the rest of the box office to get through first.
Yes, not to say that Wicked 2 has not, or Wicked 2, getting ahead of myself, that Wicked hasn't already been doing well. It's definitely been doing well. In its second week, it's number two at $118 million. It did not drop too far. And that puts it at a 263 million domestic right now. Of course, if Moana has a decent second week, it will pass that, but still, all things considered, not being a Disney movie and also not being a sequel, even though it is based on a known property, that's impressive for Wicked.
Yes, but this is also what we talked about last week,
Yeah.
where we said that Wicked could be the only non-sequel to break into the top 10.
Yeah.
Well,
It
Moana
did.
is kind of being like, nah, that's my place.
Right. So remains to be seen how long it's on that list.
Yes.
Coming in at number three, we have Gladiator 2 with 44 million this week. That's at 111 million. So that did cross the 100 mark. It will do pretty well.
Can't say the same thing about the next two movies.
No, you cannot, because the Christmas season has started with a little bit of trouble. With Red One at number four, 18 million this week. That's only at 75. Surely The Rock is going to be on his social media platforms complaining about this one too. And then number five, the best Christmas pageant ever, another week here, 4.8 million this week. That's at 31.
Yeah, but with Moana, speaking of The Rock, with Moana 2 coming in at number one, that does mean that gives Dwayne Johnson two number one films in the
Mhm.
same month, a feat that has not occurred in box office history as a leading man
Yeah. I mean,
or
he's,
woman.
yeah. He definitely spread himself out this season. He was just like, I'm just gonna hedge my bets here, being all the hits. So I guess good to be The Rock. But let's move on to this coming week. It's the holidays. It's going to slow down release wise, and we're seeing that here. The only release is Night Bitch.
Yes, Amy Adams is a werewolf mom,
Yeah,
is a dog mom who becomes a dog that is a mom. And we need to
I'm still
express
muted.
ourselves.
I realized I was still muted. Sorry.
Yes.
What a weird concept. I know a lot of people are saying this sounds like a movie that was created on 30 Rock, and it doesn't seem too far off.
No, no, it doesn't.
Anyway, so yeah, Night Bitch, I guess if you want to see a movie, but realistically, you're seeing Wicked or Moana.
Yep.
All right. Speaking of Moana, let's talk about those numbers that you mentioned. It's hit quite a few milestones already, even if it's in its first week. First up, it had a $57.5 million domestic Wednesday opening day. This surpasses other 2024 domestic totals of Joker, Transformers 1, and yes, Disney's own Wish, their big holiday release from last year. That's incredible in one day.
No, it didn't
It's
pass
the
The Incredibles. That's a different
haha,
movie.
that's a different movie. It's the biggest Wednesday opening in November of all time, passing The Matrix Revolutions, which made $25 million in 2003. So that's been a long time. It also made $66 million worldwide on opening day. Needless to say, Moana 2 cemented a new Thanksgiving box office record with its $225 million over the 5-day holiday frame, obliterating the previous high watermark set by Frozen 2 of 125. So almost $100 million more. And that was a
Yes.
pre-pandemic release. So this is a message, I think, to all the studios that even though scientifically this isn't true, but at least as as movie theaters are treated, it looks like we're back. Like it looks like all that stuff has passed and people are going to movies again. This is proof, which is wild.
This is also kind of proof, and maybe more so just a look at to Disney of did they bet on the wrong horse here? Because we know that they're making Frozen 3 and Frozen 4 as back-to-back films. And then here comes Moana 2, which was supposed to be a direct to Disney Plus sequel show,
Yeah.
turned into a movie, turned into a wide release, getting
Yeah.
$225 million and potentially setting up for a Moana 3 and a Moana 4 of itself.
Well, there's two things about that. One, I don't think these movies are in competition with each other as you're purporting they are. I
Are
think
they?
this
They
just
took the same Thanksgiving holiday release.
if I was Disney, though, I would be looking at this rises all ships, right? You're probably thinking like, oh, we're correct with believing that these animated films are going to do well from here on out. Like they're looking at Inside Out too and Moana too, and being like, if we make sequels to these movies that people love, people will see them and in droves. This has been proven now. I think Frozen 3 will be a smash, and I think this is an early indicator of that. But the second thing, though, is that this is kind of scary, though, if you're worried about those Moana 2 reviews, because this is proof to Disney that the strategy that we poo pooed of them taking something that was meant for Disney Plus as a series and rejiggering it to
Retooling
be
it.
a movie ended up being incredibly successful for them. And the reviews seem to bear out that that may have not have been the best choice critically, artistically, but financially, they're going to look at those books and be like, well, we just got to keep doing that. It definitely leaves a lot of question marks in the air about what they do with Disney Plus from here on out. What becomes a Disney Plus project, which used to be extreme, like streaming specific. What maybe more of those go to theaters than before. Maybe they have to retool their entire streaming strategy after seeing how this worked.
And not just with the Disney animation, but also with Star Wars,
Yeah.
Marvel, Muppets, if they were going to go back and do that.
It's got to be confusing. It feels probably like a roller coaster ride for them if they're talking about streaming, right? They were super high on it. They thought it was going to be the biggest thing in the world, that this was going to be the future of the business. And then the numbers didn't come in as well. Now they're like, well, what about now? This is a little twist, right? On the roller coaster ride, where they're like, well, wait a minute. This just proves that maybe we were on to something here. However, it only is going to take one huge flop for all of this to turn over. And I wonder if that will happen.
Name that flop, though.
I don't know. Maybe the next Star Wars thing. Maybe this is Grogu. I don't know.
Mm,
We'll
yeah,
see.
that is next on their
That would be
block
next.
on the docket.
So yeah.
Yeah, but
Anyway,
if that's a hit and that was a Disney Plus show going to the
yes.
movies,
Then that just
then I
proves the
think
point.
I think that's the double down of proving the
Yeah.
proof in the pudding that they're going to go that way from now on, which
Yeah.
we don't want to.
No, but again,
But
Disney,
as we say here, it's
yeah,
a business.
they don't seem to care about what we think. They seem to care about what the money says, and that's where they're going to go. So we'll
Yes.
see what they do with it. Um, Meanwhile, though, so yeah, let me wrap up the story here. Through the 5-day weekend, Moana started off to $389 million, a new milestone, as Disney confirmed the film has posted the largest ever reported animated opening weekend at the global box office, overtaking the previous record held by the Super Mario Brothers movie last year, which likewise included that 5-day domestic start. So, yes, are they being generous with the term weekend? Absolutely. But that still made more money than Super Mario Brothers, so they're technically right. But it goes to show you that that brief moment last year when we were concerned, it's like, wait a minute, the biggest animated film of the year is not Disney. Well, they just took that crown right back, and we're like, nope, nope, we're still there, we're still on top.
It's like that one year when the Chiefs didn't make the playoffs or didn't make the Super Bowl, and then come back the next year and be like, "Oh, by the way, thank you for that."
Yeah, it's like, so no, that was ours. Thank you. But yeah, so there you go. Yeah, Moana too. Making the money. Let's hope they learn
Yep.
the right lessons from this.
All right. I mean, what's next? Strange World 2? Wish 2?
Who knows? I don't know. Maybe it'll improve on those movies. All right. You
All
trying to
right.
think of something more obscure?
No, I'm trying to think of more Disney movies, recent Disney movies that were actual hits. And I
Yeah.
can't. That's not sequels.
Well, yeah, kind of
And that's the
been a
problem.
while. Yep.
Yep.
We'll see how Mufasa does. That's our next big release.
Yes, that's their live action release, though.
Yeah.
Well, live action.
Sort of, kind of. Anyway. All right, let's move on. We watched some movies. So I think that you should tell me about what you thought about Hundreds of Beavers before we get into the Wicked talk.
Okay. So you said I absolutely needed to watch Hundreds of Beavers.
Yes,
You
absolutely.
said that I would enjoy Hundreds of Beavers.
Yes,
And that's all you left it off with. And then I watched the
correct.
trailer of 100 Beavers and be like, okay, so it's a black and white movie with everyone in a beaver costume
Mhm.
and it seems like chaos, artsy
Yep.
chaos film. Went to a bunch of festivals, won a bunch of awards, did not get an actual theatrical release.
Yep.
So go into this like, okay, that's on my mind here. One, I can see why this didn't get an actual theatrical release. Probably doesn't deserve it. Two, what the hell did you make me watch?
Oh no.
I'm pretty sure I watched the same Hundreds of Beavers,
Yeah,
but at the
there's
same
only
time,
one.
as I was watching it, I was both mesmerized and confused and a little bit enjoying myself because this is basically a Looney Tunes, live action Looney
Yes,
Tunes. That's all. That's
100%.
what it is. There's very little dialogue. It's all action. It's all animation. It's all like very weird and crudely, but also charmingly edited together
Yeah.
to provide this sense of slapstick comedy that, like I said, harkens back to just pure Looney Tunes in a live action format.
Yep.
The people running around in the Beavers costumes and all the other costumes fit with the theme of this film, which is nostalgic chaos. I want
Mhm.
to put it. I did enjoy my time. I don't think it's gonna be on my top five, like you said,
Ah,
but actually, we'll see what other films I have, but I've watched this year because
Yeah.
that's a very short list now. But yeah, it's chaos.
Yeah.
But as the story progressed, I was like, okay, Wile E. Coyote here is learning something. He's understanding what's happening. He's
Mhm.
putting the dots together. By the time he got to the second half of this movie, which wasn't just total slapstick, it was, oh, now there's a plan. Now there's a reason for everything that was put together. It's like, oh,
Right.
I'm connecting the dots as they're connecting the dots. I'm seeing where this is going. And then it's like, oh, you think you know where we're going? Nope. Let's go this way and introduce Mr. Trapper over here. And you have no idea what's happening. I was like,
Yeah.
okay, now it's like video game logic where
Yes.
I've got a goal, and each goal requires new skills, and each goal requires more beavers. Thus, the hundreds of beavers in the
Yep.
title.
Yep.
Um, Really weird decision to put the title card at the 1 hour mark
Yep.
of a hour and 50 movie.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Really weird decision there. It's
I mean, you
like,
could
okay,
say really weird decision about 90% of this movie, honestly.
really? Because I thought the beavers going into outer space was like perfectly set up throughout this entire movie.
Sure, why not? Why wouldn't they?
And that's as jokey as that sounds, that's also not a joke.
That's it. Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned video game logic because, yeah, I think the thing that really clicked for me about this movie that I read about it was that I guess in an interview, the director said that he was inspired, that act two of this film is inspired by Let's Play YouTube videos. Makes sense, right? Like,
Yes.
it's not just, doesn't just seem like a video game. It's literally, that's what he's doing here. But it's presented in a way where if you don't know what it is, you are just logicking it together yourself. You're just feeling like, oh no, he's just figuring out how the trapping works. But for people who know, like we do, it's fascinating how modern it is juxtaposed with this very old-fashioned presentation and vibe, right?
Hmm.
It's fascinating to me because of that, right? Like we went to film school, so we're kind of familiar with the kind of thing this is trying to evoke, right? Like the silent era, Laurel and Hardy, your Charlie Chaplin. It's even shot kind of like an impressionistic, like early 1910s film, right? Like you get
Hmm.
the kind of like the
Everything's
vignetted
matted. Yeah.
shot, you get like the very crude looking art, you get like the heavy shadows, and at the same time it does like try to do these weird modern things every once in a while, and it doesn't throw you off. I feel like it works somehow in this weird, in the movie's own weird internal logic. You kind of buy into it. I think it's interesting how it's like by the first hour you're just like, all right, I'm strapped in now. I'm like ready for like whatever this guy ends up like having to deal with next. You kind of like buy into the universe, which is something you don't think is going to happen when you first see that first 5 to 10 minutes where you're just like, what the hell am I watching?
I mean, to be fair, the first 5 to 10 minutes of this film is a musical.
Yeah,
It's an opening act number. And
which is
then
funny for a
it's
movie
funny
that's
because as
largely silent after that.
yeah, it's right side out there, and you don't like basically forget about everything that happened in those first 10 minutes
Yeah.
until it miraculously wraps all the way back around
Yes.
to like the start of Act Three.
Yeah. But anyway, we don't need to go long on it. What I will say is that yeah, like I'm glad that you enjoyed it for the reasons why I enjoyed it. It's just it's a special little thing. It's a miracle that it exists. Like you start asking too many questions about it, it almost kind of falls apart. So maybe like we should like treat it as just this like weird rare object, like and put it on a shelf. Like because that's how it feels to me. It feels like a house of cards almost. If you start pulling apart at it, it maybe doesn't have that special feeling anymore. Because yeah, you could look at it in a different lens and be like, okay, some of these special effects aren't super professional. Maybe there wasn't a theatrical run because maybe there couldn't be. Although, important to note, studios did approach them, as I mentioned
Mhm.
last week. They were interested in a theatrical run. They were the ones, the creators were the ones who said no, because they were like, well, if you're only going to put it in theaters for like a couple of weeks and then put it on VOD, we might as well just jump straight to VOD. So it's not like they didn't, but you're right in saying that it doesn't feel like something that sits on a marquee next to Moana 2 or Wicked. It doesn't feel like that kind of movie. And so, yeah, there's a billion reasons why this thing maybe shouldn't work. But the fact that it does, and it's as entertaining and as funny as it is, I think is quite a story. Like, I think it's quite a miracle.
I think going into this with as little knowledge as possible definitely helps with it because by the
Yeah.
time you get through the chaos of Act One, you're pretty much like locked in for the ride of, okay,
Right.
whatever happens here, I'm accepting it
Yeah.
rather than trying to, like you said, logic your way through it because you're way past logic by the
Oh
time
yeah.
you get there.
It's a cartoon video game logic, but it owns it. And I think that it's
Yes.
for the better of it. Like as long as you're like approaching it that way, I think you're gonna have a good time.
If you like any of the laser cats that SNL did way back in the early 2000s,
Yeah, it's similar vibe.
similar vibe
Yeah.
here, which I think you will appreciate the humor of.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, definitely seek it out. Like I said, if you're listening to this and you haven't seen it, it's free on YouTube. And I think somebody said it's also up on Prime Video now. So you can just watch it. Like go just watch it.
Yep.
But
It's free with ads on YouTube. Ads
I
are
have
every 10
premium
minutes, but you
I
can
have
skip it.
premium,
Oh,
so
I'm
it's fine.
sorry. Not all of us can spend $5 on premium or
Five
Red
whole
or
bucks.
whatever, or YouTube Plus or whatever they're calling it.
Yeah, whatever they call it now. Anyway. So that's Hundreds of Beavers, but yes, obviously we want to actually talk about the big film that was released this past couple weeks actually. We're
Yep.
coming to it a little
Moana
late.
2.
No, we're not going to talk about Moana 2 yet. We haven't seen that. But what we have seen
Okay.
is Wicked. Of course, the film adaptation of the Broadway musical. So you saw this, right?
Yes.
Okay, making sure.
Yes. I did not see the Broadway musical. I've only seen the movie
Okay,
adaptation of the Broadway musical, which is an adaptation of a book, which is
book.
a
Yes.
adaptation of
Yeah.
the original book, Wizard of Oz.
Well, yeah, it's a prequel
Hmm.
of sorts. It's a sequel and a prequel because of what the story does
Because
after
half,
the
yes,
first
because
part.
after the first
The first,
act.
yeah, the first act
I'm
is
aware of what
establishes.
Wicked is and how it sets everything
Yeah.
up.
So I've not read the book, but have seen the musical. I think back in 2007 or 8.
It came out in
Uh,
'06,
so but the LA
but that was
tour,
Broadway.
it had
So yeah,
a
LA tour probably '08, then '07,
yeah, it
'08.
had a couple year run at the Pantages in LA, I think through 08, 09. So I think that's probably where when I saw it. But yeah, so I have seen the musical. Pretty familiar with the soundtrack. It was running in my parents' cars for a while there. So yeah, I came into this with a lot of prior knowledge about Wicked and a lot of prior opinions about Wicked. I'll be brief. First act I think is great. I think there's a lot of great songs. Second act weaker. I remember that was kind of what I took away with when I saw Wicked for the first time. I was like, the second half, the songs are not as good and it's kind of boring. And the stuff that the climax has already happened, basically. So I was very curious to see how this would adapt
Teenager
into
Matt
a
was
film.
already making strong opinions on
Oh
musical
yeah.
theater.
Oh yeah. You know me. But yeah, it was like I went into this thinking like, okay, they're gonna split this into two parts. That's a little worrying for part two. How are they going to establish this whole thing in part one? So, as someone coming into this relatively fresh, what did you think about Wicked part one?
Well, I knew because we follow all the movie news that this was going to be a part one and part two.
Yeah,
A lot of people in the audience didn't know that.
right.
So when the logo showed up and it said part one,
Part
you
one.
heard audible gasps like, "What? They're doing a Dune here?" Whereas Dune actually did at the very end. It said Dune part one, and like actually got a lot of people like shook as to what they were going to do. So going into this, I knew it was going to be a part one. I knew it was going to end with Defying Gravity because
Yeah,
that's the song that ends it. Like I know about that much. I don't know anything about Act Two because, like you said, Act One,
Yeah.
very strong, very powerful, very memorable, and people talk about it a lot. It's been showcased a lot. It's just like cultural osmosis. You pick up more of like what's going to happen with it.
Yeah.
Um, I'm sorry, what was the question again?
There wasn't really a question. I was just asking how you felt about the movie.
Oh, okay. Um, I felt that this movie was big.
Hmm.
Big in the sets, big in the production, big in the use of the camera, which praise to John M. Chu.
Yeah.
You clearly know how to direct pretty much anything. I will watch like anything you put out now because you are a
He
really,
does
really, really good director.
spectacle. Yeah, he does spectacle real well. Like he's a great director for if you want the feeling of something very large and a lot of people and like especially dance sequences. Like he's very clearly like we talked about In the Heights,
Hmm.
his last musical that he directed here on the podcast a couple of years ago, and I remember we were pretty impressed by how he shot that too.
Yeah. Uh, he knows what he's doing. He's doing how to pull this together, how to make you feel like both these big bombastic musical numbers, but also the intimacy between your main
Mm.
characters. That he has a really good eye
Yeah.
of how to shoot it, how to direct it, how to choreograph the movement of both the camera and the actors around the space. Because one thing that like musical theater does that you can do in movies, but you can't do on stage is have that movement with the audience on the stage because there's a fourth wall. You can't break it.
Yeah.
But with movies, you can. Spin that camera around. Give me the full 360 view. Give me this lived in feeling and not just actors in a play. And that's what you got here. That's why it felt big. Every like the big two set pieces of Emerald City and Chiz University
Yeah.
like felt big. They felt like you can feel the characters moving throughout it.
Yeah.
Even just sitting in there from a fourth wall break movie theater that you felt that you were within it. That and that's why it felt big. It felt great, it felt grand. On the other side, though, I was completely thrown within the first 5 minutes by uh Elphaba's mama bear coming in and being like, what was going on here? Wait, what? What's
Yeah, if
happening?
you don't know anything about the world of Oz besides the Wizard of Oz, all
Yes.
the animal backstory stuff will be a complete surprise. In fact, I had seen Wicked before and I had forgotten about that entire subplot, which is not really a subplot. It's kind of the impetus for everything that happens in Wicked, if you
Yeah.
think about it. But yes, it is important to know, maybe going into it, but if not, it's not the hugest, like, you'll get it. You'll pick it up pretty quick, like you did, just described. But yes, animals used to be a bigger presence. They used to speak. They had like leadership roles, and that has slowly become not the norm. That slowly they're being pushed out to the edges of society. And over the course of the film, you find out who's responsible for that. But
Yeah.
yeah,
I thought that was really good play
yeah,
to the way they bring it in, the way they hide it and reveal it over the course of the film.
right.
That's one thing that the film did that bugged me is that they that a lot of films do this, but for some reason here it just really irked me of the reveal, the third act reveals, where they
Yeah,
hide the faces, they obscure the faces in the first act or the first like opening, only to have like the big reveal later. But it's not that much of a reveal if it's kind of like the one that irked me was the face, like Alphabet's face. Like, why hide the face in the first 10 minutes? It's gonna be like the main character. We've seen it on the poster, you see it everywhere. Why are you obscuring it in the first 10 minutes? Why are you obscuring this face and that face for a reveal later when like you obviously know who that person is because you're doing like a
yeah,
flash forward here?
yeah. I don't
That
know.
kind of irked me.
I mean, I think it's because I think thematically as a movie that is rated PG, keep that in mind.
Yeah, yeah.
There are certain things that I feel like, yeah, a PG-13 cut of this film probably would have been more clear about than maybe they can, is what the way I'll put it. Because what you're talking about is kind of a spoiler. So I
Yes,
can't
that's
say
why I'm
it
not spoiling
explicitly.
it.
But yes, I had that thought you did as well. And how I logicked it out was the rating. Is like I was like, okay, they kind of have to be cagey about the circumstance here because I think that delves into a thematic element of the story that maybe they don't want to dwell on. They don't want to, they want to maybe keep that for some reveals in Act Two, which I think is what happens. I can't remember again. It's been a long time since I've seen it, but I want to say that that stuff is brought back up.
I
It's
assume
just,
it does because they made a big
yeah,
deal about it of
right.
to obscure the face.
And it makes sense when you think about it because the themes of this film um, it is suggested that there is a connection between those two characters and that there's something in common, perhaps, that they have. And so, yeah, and so it's like it makes sense why they would like at least hint at it, but they don't need to go. The nice thing you're given, the luxury you're given in a two-part film, is that you can kind of address maybe some of the loose ends in Act Two, and I think they will.
Right, and those that you have to set up some characters in Act
Yeah.
One who have bigger parts to play in
Yes.
Act Two.
And I think that is what I will say. I want to be clear is I thought they did a really good job here. I think that as a movie that is divided into two acts, I think for the most part, they do a pretty good job of justifying it. It doesn't feel arbitrary. In fact, I think, and I wrote this in my write up that will be on the website in a few weeks. But I really truly believe that it did allow them more time for those personal moments that they wouldn't have had otherwise. If this was one film, everything would have been too crammed. You wouldn't have had any time for anything. And I'm glad
Mhm.
that they separated it. It's a little long, but it doesn't feel too long because even the quiet moments are interesting. Specifically, the moment between the dance moment, to be broad, between Elphaba and Glenda is particularly moving in a way that I didn't expect it to be. I think maybe even more effective here with the ability to have those close-ups and those emotional, like see the tears rolling down faces that it probably works on stage because you get that kind of fidelity in a film that you don't
Mhm.
get when you're, up in the orchestra seats. Um, so without the two-part setup, you wouldn't have that moment, and I'm glad that it's here. I'm glad that they're able to give you the big dance spectacle, but also give you those intimate moments, which you mentioned. But the one part where you're right, where I feel like it's unfortunate that it is a two-part film is what you're describing, which is you have to set stuff up to fall down later. And it does feel a little awkward sometimes. And that's unavoidable, unfortunately. Just the way that they're telling the story, there's going to be some things that you feel aren't finished because they literally aren't. And you're just going to have to sit in that weird zone.
I feel like a lot of the threads here were
Yeah.
left unfinished.
Mm.
That you completely, when entering the third act of the film, ignore everything that happened at the school. It's like okay, like you're teaching, it's a school setting,
Yeah.
getting a bunch of Harry Potter vibes here because of it. And then all of a sudden, Act Three, we're thrust into
Yeah.
Emerald City
Yeah.
and never go back there.
Yeah. Well, Act Two does address that. And we do
Yeah.
return to a lot of the characters that we kind of left there. That's from my vague recollection of the plot. So yeah, you're not wrong. But the climax has to be the defying gravity climax and has to
Hmm.
happen there. And I think that's why they chose to do that. In fact, there's a quote from John M. Chu where he basically says like, I knew from beginning this that if we were going to do a part one and part two, part one had to end on the climax with defying gravity because there was no scene that we could write after that wouldn't feel anticlimactic. And he's right.
Hmm.
You can't
Hmm.
follow, you can't stop the show on a showstopper or start the show on a showstopper. But in this case, it's a showstopper because that's where the show stops. And it
Yeah.
has to be that way. It was always going to be that way because that's how the stage show is. It'd be like, please don't do this, movie studios. So don't listen to me right now. This is just for the people do not have make financial decisions for films. Okay. You guys are tuned out. Okay. If they ever do another film version of Phantom of the Opera, and God forbid it's two parts, you gotta end Act One on the chandelier crashing scene. It's
Hmm.
exactly the same feeling. Uh, that is leads, I think, directly to the choice of defying gravity at the end of Act One of Wicked. Is because it is the big emotional climax, that story, and you come out and go into intermission being like, "Holy shit, what just happened?" And that's how you had to end this movie. So yes, it's gonna feel weird and abrupt, but
Hmm.
also it's gonna let you out of that theater being like, hell yeah, let's bring on Act Two. That was a rush. I'm ready.
Yeah, but I think that's also because Act One had the two big hits of
Yeah.
Popular and Defying Gravity in it. So people are going to
Yes.
leave with a positive feeling, especially in that ending scene. Just
Yeah.
beautifully shot, by the way.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
I say that about a lot of the stuff in this film. That beautifully shot, beautifully
Yeah.
choreographed. That it's yeah, you're gonna have a lot of good memories from part one, which I think will help people going into part two. But
Yeah.
like you said, part two not gonna be as strong as
I
part one.
mean, we'll see because that's the thing. I think it's a big question mark because I think to recap and wrap this up so we can move on. I do think generally speaking, this is a very well made film. It takes advantage of the time that they're allowed by doing a part one and part two. I think that we didn't even mention Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo are pretty perfect, pretty much as close to perfect as you can in a movie like this.
Mhm.
They honestly, I think, hold this thing on their shoulders. Like, I think John M. Chu is a good director, but I don't think that this is the same movie if the leads aren't as strong as they are. They really carry this thing. Ariana Grande, funnier than I thought. Like, I knew she had a sense of humor, but she brings a whole new angle to Glenda that I think was really well done. And Cynthia Erivo is just constantly just so down to earth and just is always the center of the film and is the emotional heart. Like I think that yeah, between the two of them, they're just fantastic. So yeah, I think overall it's a successful film, and it's definitely going to be on my top five. It's higher actually than I thought it was going to be before I saw it. Uh, but the big question mark, the big elephant in the room now is what do you do with Act Two? And yeah, you're right. The foundation that they're building on, not strongest. There's fewer notable songs. There's pretty much one big song that's not in Act One that's coming, and Christy's very excited to see it. But besides that, they already know that they're going to have to kind of zhuzh it up a little bit because it was confirmed that there are two, not one, but two original songs that are going to be added to Act Two to
Ooh.
fill in. And it is, again, it's that feeling of this could either be great because maybe it injects some energy, which I believe that he can do. I believe that if any director can kind of bring some more energy into this, into Act Two of this, maybe he could do it. But it also leaves more, variables that could go wrong. Like, and it does make you wonder, like, are we teetering like a little bit towards this not being as good as Act One just by default? And so, yeah, it's going to be fascinating come a year from now, when that film comes out, to see how it ends up.
It'll be interesting to see, like you said, especially how it ends, because
Yeah.
I kind of have like an idea just through like cultural osmosis of what the characters will become in
Right.
part two.
You kind of know if you've seen The
But
Wizard of Oz, you know where everybody lands largely.
yeah, and they kind of like sprinkle it in throughout the act one here, which I
Yeah.
do like. It's not in your face, which I absolutely love that it's very subtle
Yes.
in what they do, but they do lay those breadcrumbs in there to where if you know what's going to happen, like you can like catch it and be like, ah, but
Yeah.
it's not like in your face where you're like, oh my God. Like that's one thing I hate when that prequels do for original stories,
Right.
especially
Right.
stuff that sets it up. Like, for example, if one of the characters purposely gave someone a tin can,
Right.
they're like oil tin can, just like very in your face about it, and be like, okay, you did obviously didn't need that.
Yeah.
But what they did here is that
It's
they put it on the desk and they added
yeah.
it. It's an addition to it, and they made it work within the film. I was like, oh, I see what that is. Okay, I
Yeah,
see you.
there's no that's why his name is Han Solo moment here, which is good
Yes.
because you don't
No
want that.
ham-fisted way about
It's
it.
so
But yes.
gross. But anyway.
But yeah, well done. Well done. Well deserved.
Yeah, I think it's a good
Um,
movie.
yeah. Anything else we want to say about Wicked that we haven't said
No,
yet?
I think that's a good place to wrap that up, which means it's a good place for me to go. So yeah, I'll leave the rest of the keys to the car, the media boat vehicle to you, and I'm going to rest my voice.
Well, you
So
better because we're going right into the sports section.
have fun. Bye.
All right,
I won't break
bye.
this if I leave, right? You'll be able
No,
to continue. Okay. Okay,
you'll
bye.
continue. Yep, because we're going right into the sports section. And we start with the best in show. Yes, every Thanksgiving, best in show, Westminster Kennel Club comes into town, and we have our best dog. Vito the pug was named best in show, which I kind of called when I watched it because, like, ooh, that pug looks awesome. And he ended up winning the best in show. I was like, haha. So maybe I do have an eye for all this Kennel Club stuff. Speaking of animals over in the NFL, the Bears have done something they have never done in their 103-year history. They have fired a head coach mid-season, and well done so because Matt Eberflus blew what could potentially been a game-tying field goal to send it overtime against the number one Lions, their division opponents, only to screw it up so bad that they didn't even get a playoff. They spent one play for 36 seconds, and yeah, God, Dunzo. So someone who wants the Bears head coaching job, you got a fresh quarterback, Caleb Williams, rookie, waiting for you. Let's see here. Real quickly over in baseball, the first game of the next season has officially been posted. The Cubs will play the Dodgers on February 19th, 2025, as the first preseason game. So only a couple of months to look forward to that. As we go into the NBA Cup playoffs who are going to be starting soon, and we know who's going to be playoff bound, including the Magic, the Knicks, the Bucks, the Piston, the Hawks, the Celtics, the Rockets, the Trailblazers, the Spurs, the Warriors, and the Mavericks. All have officially clinched their spot into the playoffs. Everyone else, better luck next year. This does include the Los Angeles Lakers, last year's winners, which means we will have a new team hoisting the Emirates NBA Cup. Over in hockey, we will not be having an All-Star game this season. Instead, the NHL and the NHLPA are staging a Four Nations face-off, which will run from February 12th through the 20th. This will be a round robin tournament that will feature four national teams. You got Canada, you got Finland, you got Sweden, and you got the United States. Four teams with NHL players from those nations filling up those rosters. The Four Nations Face Off, as it will officially be called, will be held in North America and Canada, splitting games between the Bell Center in Montreal and the TD Garden in Boston. Because Boston and Montreal were were two of the original six teams in the NHL. Kind of a little hockey fact there, throwing it in there. Full rosters for those will be announced on Wednesday. There's already been some like predetermined because they're like obvious all-stars to help fill out the rosters, but full rosters will be announced on Wednesday. That is tomorrow as of this recording. Now we get to talk about the actual big sporting news of the past weekend and of this upcoming weekend with N the NFL, the NFL D League, what I actually want to say, NCAA football playoffs, because it was chaos this past weekend, where number two, the Ohio State, lost to Michigan. Number six, Miami, lost to Syracuse. Number seven, Georgia, should have lost to unranked Georgia Tech, but they went to 8 overtimes in order to secure that win. And lastly, number 12, Clemson, lost to number 15, South Carolina. But there's some good news. Some glimmer, I guess. Oregon did manage to finish the season undefeated with a perfect record of 12 and 0. This means that no matter what happens in the upcoming championship game, they have secured the number one seed in the playoffs and will get that first round bye. This means that three other teams will be looking to secure that first round bye with the conference champions games this upcoming weekend. They include Mountain West, where number 19 UNLV will take on number 10 Boise State. The AAC, where number 30 Tulane will take on number 24 Army. In the Big 12, number 16 Iowa State will take on number 12 Arizona State. In the SEC, number 5 Georgia will take on number 2 Texas. In the Big 10, number 3 Penn State will take on number 1 Oregon. And in the ACC, number 18 Clemson will take on number 8 SMU. Now there's our teams that are ranked but not playing a championship game of note include number 4 Notre Dame, number 6 Tennessee, number 7 The Ohio State, number 9 Indiana, and number 11 Alabama. Notable about Alabama, they are technically a 3-loss team. But because they're ranked at 11, and no matter what, there must be 12 teams entering the college playoff picture, we could see Alabama squeak in because of strength of schedule and favoritism on a 3-loss record, whereas every other team in the top 24, top 25 have 1 or 2 losses. We will see because they will be picked next Sunday. So lots of championship games happening, placing those trophies, and we will see who comes out on top and what the rankings are by next week. All right, let's get into some TV news where we have the final blow occurring from Cartoon Network. Titles like The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy and Ed, Edd and Eddy will be removed from Max, as Cartoon Network has constantly been hit with the hardest of the company's ongoing changes. While Warner Brothers has announced numerous projects and spin-offs of popular Cartoon Network programs, it still doesn't hide the fact that Warner Brothers shut down the Cartoon Network website and closed its Burbank studio last year. Other shows that will be leaving Max by the end of this year are the 2003's Teen Titans, 2011's The Looney Tunes Show, 2000's Static Shock, and 2011's Green Lantern animated series. Once those shows are gone, the only ones remaining are Courage the Cowardly Dog and the 1998 version of the Powerpuff Girls. Meanwhile, some of its 2010 titles, like Adventure Time, will also remain on the streaming site, but even those, as we've talked about before, are becoming scarce and few and far between. This is part of the continuing adventures of David Zaslav's axe, coming down on pretty much any and all very old cartoon shows, whether it's because they don't want to pay royalties on it, don't want to pay any additional fees on it, or, as mentioned here, that they want to reboot those so that way they own it wholly and internally. So that way, if people are searching for these shows, they search for the new and current ones and not the old ones that they used to have up there. We'll see how this all shakes out, but it's never a good look when you continually axe kind of these legacy shows like the original Teen Titans, like Static Shock, and Ed, Edd and Eddy, Billy and Mandy. I'm sure that they have their reasoning that a lot of people are watching these shows. But if that's the case, give us the numbers. Tell us that these shows aren't being watched. Tell us that they need to make room for server space instead of, maybe buying or building more servers in order to maintain them. That, yes, I know we say it always on here, it's a business, but you also kind of need to be transparent into why you're axing some of these shows. Because if you're going to give it to us, and then take it away, people are going to wonder, why are you taking it away when you were able to give to us before without any reason being provided? It's part of the whole streaming issues that we've had. That it's why we hearken here on the Media Podcast for physical media. That just because it's available on streaming doesn't mean it will always be available on streaming. That just because you have access to it now doesn't mean you'll always have access to it down the line. Which is why we say buy physical media when you can, especially around this holiday season. Get those box sets because you never know when the streaming rights will be gone. All right. Um, Now I do have two thoughts to talk about. First, I did end up finishing Man on the Inside, the Netflix show. And I really wish Matt was here to both, one, play he watched it, and two, talk about it because it went places I didn't know it would go to. I mean, as I would should have expected from Michael Schur, but he took the kind of mystery box love that came from like these current like rise of mystery films. Thank you, Ryan Johnson, and give it a cute own kind of quirky charm with Man on the Inside. I think Ted Danza perfectly charming in this role. I see why they would want to continue to work with him and why they continue to make these kind of shows where they're nice shows. There's nothing really malice about the show. There's nothing really evil, no antagonistic plot about it. It's just kind of a tongue-in-cheek kind of fact of life show where it deals with old age, retirement community, uh, people aging, people dying, people getting dementia, that these are facts of life that we mostly don't look at. And to put it's not really a positive spin on it, but more of shedding a light on it of how it interacts and how people treat it and how it's um, affects people as they age. That I think, much like with The Good Place, another Michael Schur show, kind of shone a light on like the afterlife of what it could be and how you should be a better person in this life rather than wait for an afterlife. That Man on the Inside kind of does the same thing, that you should appreciate kind of your grandparents, kind of those elderly people who may not be here longer or may be here physically, but not all there mentally. So I enjoyed it more than I thought I would, but not necessarily as a complete show in terms of like a Michael Schur comedy, where, as we put in the past, The Good Place, number one show on the Meadville podcast. I don't think this rises to that level, but the tone and the message that it sends definitely gets up there. The second show we'll talk about real quickly is Skeleton Crew. First two episodes dropped today. They will be Tuesday airing episodes on Disney Plus. This is marketed as the Amblin Goonies-esque uh, series within the Star Wars universe, where it's a bunch of kids who get all caught up into space pirates within Star Wars. At least that's what it was billed as. And I can kind of see it over these first two episodes, but I'm curious as to where they're going. Based on that pitch, I was mostly just treating this out of curiosity of what it's going to be, what it's going to look like. And I fully expected to just kind of bounce off of this because I don't like that kind of style of movie that they're, which is why I kind of like only watched first season of Stranger Things and nothing else because I didn't really like, if you don't like your main kid characters and you think they're either too kid or too grown up, that there's got to be kind of the sweet spot between both like knowledgeable but also naive. Because you can't have your kids be way too smart, that they're smarter than the grown-ups, which was my problem with Stranger Things. And you can't have the kids that are too dumb and stupid to where they don't know what's going on, which is my problem with the Goonies. This you gotta find that right kind of balance right in the middle. And I think they kind of find it here. I'd like to watch more episodes, of course, because they introduced Jude Law right at the end to kind of keep you get the hook to keep you coming back. So I like to see how he interacts with the kids because that's the other thing that when I heard about this that he was going to be in it. That okay, how are we going to try to change this? How are you going to hook it together? How is it going to be together? And I think John Watts, who directed and created this, uh, has an idea, and I'm going to try and follow him on this. Unless he goes too off the deep end and goes full Goonies, much like Rise of Skywalker did with the damn dagger, then I'll be completely abandon it. But so far, it's done enough to keep me hooked. And it's done one thing that's kind of a twist in there that I'm liking what they did. I like this twist that they're doing, and I like how it's if it's going to go a certain way. I like what I like how it feels fresh. That's what Star Wars needs, a way to feel fresh, and this makes it feel fresh. So I'll be watching more Skeleton Crew. Since Matt's not here to talk about what he watched, we can go right into cancellations and renewals. What am I no longer watching? Well, glad you asked. First off, no cancellations, but a couple of renewals, including Sweet Pea gets a second season on Stars, and Bel Air will get a fourth season on Peacock, but it will be its last with its finale. We do have a couple of deaths. First up, Bob Breyer, age 44, drummer for My Chemical Romance. Yes, that My Chemical Romance, who just announced a tour. No word yet that I've seen if this is going to postpone the tour, but 44, young, and with the tour announced, this is sudden. Uh, I need to get more information on this, especially if you have those tickets for the tour. Um, we need to know what they're going to do. Probably cancel the tour, probably postpone it. But yeah, hearts go out to all you MCR fans out there. Second death, Marshall Brickman, age 85, screenwriter. Was a longtime partner, writing partner for Woody Allen because he wrote Annie Hall and Manhattan. He was also playwright for Jersey Boys. Yes, those Jersey Boys. And he ended up winning the Oscar for writing Annie Hall in 1978. Well, co-wrote with, like I said, Woody Allen. So yeah, Marshall Brickman. That is a legend of a titan of the industry. All right, let's move on then into video games, where we start with new releases, including Shadow Tactics, Blades of the Shogun, Dash, Ico's Choice for the PS5 and the Xbox Series X, Fantasian Neo Dimension for everything. Wide release. You got it. You can play it. We also have Lorelei and the Laser Eyes for the PS4 and PS5. Fitness Boxing 3, your personal trainer for the Switch. And a couple of big releases, including Marvel Rivals for the PC, PS5, and Xbox Series X, and Infinity Nikki for PC, PS5, and mobile. Um, we will be checking out both Infinity Nikki and Marvel's Rival this week, so we'll have our thoughts on that next week. Also, thoughts coming next week. Balatro from Matt. He played more of it, but since he's not here, he'll be talking about that next week. So lots of video game coverage coming next week's episode. But let's get to the video game news for this week, starting with uh, another game in the Lego series. A pitch video for a Lego James Bond video game has been leaked. The video, as made available on the Lego Gaming Reddit page, is a 47-second trailer made by Telltale Games staff showing scenes from the Bond movies recreated in Lego. Because the video was only a pitch designed to gauge interest, the footage is basic and missing a lot of details, but it is still unmistakably in the style of other Lego games made by Telltale Games. Some commenters speculated that the video may have been created for Toys to Life multiverse title, Lego Dimensions, because it's long been believed that James Bond was one of the IPs set to feature in that game before being replaced by Mission Impossible. However, the source of the leak went on to claim that this wasn't the case and that it was in fact a pitch for a standalone James Bond game. And that sounds right up the Lego alley, especially with these kind of franchises that have multiple stories, multiple iterations that can be jumped through. We saw what they did with, well, not for the Telltale games, but with the Lego properties in video game format, Lego games, with the Marvel series, both the Marvel Heroes and then the Marvel movies, cinematic verses, as well as the Jurassic Park iterations, the Ghostbusters iterations, the Horizon iteration that recently just came out, and most notably, both of the Harry Potter games, Harry Potter Lego and Star Wars Lego, especially the Skywalker saga, the complete saga, which went through all 9 films. Now, James Bond has a lot more than 9 films and 8 films for Harry Potter, but that kind of unique storytelling could lend its way into Lego. And I could see them taking that kind of aspect of James Bond, especially some of these older films, and making them more Lego-fied for kids. Now, that may be the tough sell of why they didn't go with this, is because how are you going to address the title of Octopussy in a Lego format? How are you going to address the suaveness of James Bond meeting up with I don't know, I think Pussy Galore was one of the films, one of the names. I don't know, might be confusing that with Austin Powers as well. But same idea is that there's some characters that you have to change their names because Lego is synonymous with children. Lego is synonymous with being kid friendly. And you can't, and while yes, there have been Lego games where you can go around and shoot people and combat and fight, having those character names, maybe you need to change them up. Maybe you need to change what the Bond girls' um, purpose in the movie is. Give them a lot more drive, or you know, I think that's where a lot of the probably the heads of the of Telltale Games paused on this because while yes, there's a lot to choose from in the Lego games, in there's a lot to choose from in the James Bond canon. It's how do you translate that into making it friendly for a 5-year-old? How do you translate that to make it friendly for mom, kid, grandma, the whole family, to where it's not egregiously adult because the James Bond films have been notoriously egregiously adult in both their content, their names, and storytelling. I think it can be done. I just think that it's going to take a big team to thread that needle. Um, Gameplay wise, make it into James Bond's house, and each different artifact in his house is a different story. That's how I would do it. Like uh, a hat for Odd Jobs hat, and you go into that story. You have a monocle, and you have so that's for Doctor No, the original one. You have a poker chip for Casino Royale, and that's how you jump into all of these different stories. Like that part's kind of easy to get around. It's how do you, like I said, it's how you tell those stories in a Telltale style game verse. But it's something I'm very interested in if they ever do get down to it. Uh, all right. with that, let's get into the last section here, the music section, where we start with the Billboard. We start the Billboard with the Hot 100. And the hottest song in the land is Squabble Up by Kendrick Lamar. At 2, TV Off by Kendrick Lamar, featuring Lefty Gunplay. At 3, Luther by, you guessed it, Kendrick Lamar and SZA. At 4 is Whacked Out Murals by Kendrick Lamar. And rounding out your top 5, Hey Now by Dottie 6, who's featured on a Kendrick Lamar album. If you're wondering, wow, that's a lot of Kendrick Lamar, well, it's because GNX came out last week and we talked about that last week. So if you want to hear our thoughts about it, that is last week's episode. But yes, as for the Billboard 200, GNX obviously is your number 1 album by Kendrick Lamar. Coming in at 2 is Wicked, the soundtrack by our favorite band here at the Media About Podcast, Various Artists. At 3, Short and Sweet by Sabrina Carpenter. Coming in at 4, Chromacopia by Tyler, the Creator. And rounding your top 5, Hit Me Hard and Soft by Billie Eilish. If you didn't like any of those albums, we have new releases, including Vicious Creature by Lauren Mayberry, Rosie by Rose, and 12 by White Denim. All right, so since Kendrick Lamar basically dominated the Billboard, let's talk about him, because one day after Kendrick Lamar scored a number 1 debut on the Billboard 200 with his surprise album GNX, he took to social media to announce a North American stadium tour with SZA for 2025. Dubbed the Grand National Tour for GNX, will hit 19 stadiums across North America between April and June of 2025. Tickets will go on sale this Friday, December 6th at 10 a.m. local time on grandnationaltour.com with an exclusive Cash App Visa card pre-sale on Wednesday. And note that this is not going through Ticketmaster. This is going through their own website. There's a Cash App Visa card pre-sale here. Kendrick Lamar, once again, doing his own thing. It's going to be funny. Well, not funny, but interesting to see how the announcement of this concert tour will affect the ticket sales for The Weeknd, who just had his concert, not tour, single concert, go on sale this past Monday. If people see that Kendrick Lamar is going on tour, they're like, oh, I want to hold my money now and then buy the tickets on Friday and see how it screws, if it does end up screwing over The Weeknd. But if you're unable to make either of those dates for his tour, he will still be headlining the Super Bowl come in February. So at least everyone will get to see that. If you like what you see there, then maybe go get tickets if they're still available. But yeah, Kendrick Lamar and SZA on tour in only 19 stadiums over the course of, 3 months? April, May, June? 3 months, yeah. 19 stadiums, 3 months. Kendrick Lamar is just marking his tour territory of 2025 as his own. I did not listen to any albums, and with that, that will wrap us up here for this awkwardly structured episode of the Media Boat Podcast. If you want to listen to us and not watch us, you can find us on Spotify, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, Amazon. If you'd like to watch how we do things here, you can find us on YouTube at Media Boat Podcast. We're still on Twitter at MediaBoatCast. But just like most people, we have been and still continue to be on Blue Sky, mediaboat.bsky.social. We do have a Discord, MediaBoat Podcast. We have a Twitch, MediaBoat, where I will occasionally play video games. We're still technically on Facebook. Just search MediaBoat Podcast. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, complaints, anything you want to ask us, you can email us at mediaboatpodcast@gmail.com. And lastly, if you'd like to leave us any type of reviews or see how long we've been doing the show, we do have an IMDb page. Just look up MediaBoat Podcast. And with that, we are done with this episode. As mentioned, we're going to have a lot of video games to talk about next week. We'll have a lot of TV to talk about next week. And there'll be more news, more thoughts, and more of us. Okay, bye.